Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start painting techniques. As you see, first you need to take a piece of some paint and paint in overpaint and sgraffito. You need to do this immediately because it needs the most time to dry. The next thing that you're going to do first is outline and fill in. A reminder, this is the paintbrush. This is the part where your fingers go. Paint does not go in this part, and paint remains on the hair. When you pick up paint, only get a little bit on the tip. If you have extra, just wipe it off on the side, not on the outside, on the inside. So, when you are doing outlining and filling in, and this is actually how we're going to start our paintings this year. You're not going to be using pencil, you're going to be just using your paintbrush. You start out by outlining the shape in a light color. You can do it in white, you can do it in yellow. That's pretty much your only options. So there's my shape. I'm going to let it dry, then I'll come back to it. I could always do more details outside, that sort of thing. Okay, moving on. When you need to wash out your paintbrush, you have your water bucket, you hold it, put it flat on the ground of your water bucket, and you swirl. You wipe it off on the inside down in there. You're not flicking it because then you get dirty water, and you just kind of wipe it on a paper towel. You really shouldn't have that much water left on your paintbrush. Next thing is overpainting. This means you're getting a different color and you're painting on top of another color. So whatever you want on top of another color. Woohoo! Overpainting. Delightful. Alright, the next thing is dry brushing. Dry brush is when you have a very dry brush, just a little bit of paint, and actually let me change colors. You can barely see it. When you have just a tiny bit of color on your paintbrush, just like barely any. I'm going to get just a tiny bit on my paintbrush here. I'm actually going to wipe some of that, most of that off, because I really want a dry paintbrush. And you're using this to add texture. It could be like grass texture and stuff like that. But dry brushing is one of those things that you should always do on top of another color. The next thing is sponge painting. So you take a sponge, you don't dump it in, you take a paintbrush, and you lightly paint it around the edges and in the middle of the sponge. You don't want a ton of paint on this because it's a sponge. You're not trying to get a perfect circle, you're just trying to get the texture of the sponge. After you're done using these, you have to wash them out. Lightly tap on your paper. You can twist as you're doing it, and this is a great texture. Again, this is one of those things that should be done with another color underneath. Blending. Blending is when you're taking two colors and you're mixing them and becoming one. It's also how you do highlights and shadows. Alright, so I'm going to start with one color. I'm going to wash out my paintbrush. We'll wipe it off on the side as best as I can and dry it off on my paper towel. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my other color next to it, leaving slight gap, and I'm going to start to blend them together. They're going to create a new color. Now, since I used two primary colors, I'm creating green in between them. What you're trying to do is have a smooth transition between those two colors. Sometimes it requires taking more of one color, but at the end, you'll see the original first color, the original second color, and a few new colors you created in the middle. Dabbing. Dabbing is not, a dance move. It's when you take your paintbrush and you just dab it down. This is also a great textural thing. Dabbing it down. Just boop. Just like that. Stippling is when you take the tip of your paintbrush and you're doing controlled dots. It's not all over the place. Doing controlled dots is good for making like seeds and stuff like that, or adding the texture of an orange, whatever you want to do. Great stuff. Stippling. Sgraffito is when you take another color, so you paint one color, and then you're taking another color on top of it. You're using the end of your paintbrush. I'm actually going to cover completely over this. You're taking the end of your paintbrush and you're scratching through it. So I'm going to paint over this. And you're taking the end of your paintbrush and you're scratching through it. Great for texture. Again, great for seeds, things like that. Whatever you're doing. Alright. Then wipe off the end of your paintbrush so you don't get a handful of paint. The next thing is wet on wet. It's very similar to blending, but it's where you're using two colors and you're painting them pretty much at the same time with wet. Yes. You can also use it as another excuse to practice your blending. And blending things together. Oh, look at that. You can also use multiple colors, wet on wet. It's also where you're basically mixing it and you can become a new color. and you're not even mixing it on your paper, you're mixing it directly on your paper instead of mixing it on a plate or something like that. But all right, so there are our 5th grade painting techniques.